everybody, and welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore. And today we're going to explore a load of things. I don't even know quite what we're going to explore. I have an idea of a direction in which we're going to go and what we're going to talk, but then wherever it may go in a non-tangential manner, I don't mind at all. I'm here with Laurence Douglas Cumbie, and he is going to talk about stuff that is really interesting to me right now. Some of it I don't fully understand because, well, I mean, you're only one mind able to take in one perspective, and there's a lot of knowledge that I don't have about the subject, but I'm really interested in having a real diverse conversation. And it's the first time me and Laurence are talking, and this is very exciting for me because I've looked through some of the stuff that he's done and I've said, all right, then we're going to have a good conversation. And I'm really looking forward to this. So welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast. Laurence, how are you today?
All good. Thanks so much for inviting me.
No problem. What's your, start off, let's get to know each other. What's your background?
Well, I don't know what else to say except that I'm 70 as of August, and I've been online for 20 years. So I was a late adapter to the internet. I've always felt I've always felt this tech was dirty, and I still do. And so I don't know.
When you say dirty, you mean it's like it's leading us towards somewhere worse.
I think it's the primary instrument of our enslavement. Yeah, I refer to it as technological slavery or techno-slavery. And what it allows is a depopulation agenda, which is essentially total war, unrestricted warfare upon the people. And the war is waged by people against people by design, because we live in a new system today. The system has a name, and it's undergirded by a law. And very few people speak about it. And it's troubling to me, and it has been since I went public and started engaging on the internet. Sometime about 2009. Because heretofore I thought of it as a tool for just answering, getting some questions answered that I've always had throughout my life that remained unanswered. And I was basically talked into becoming a part of the digital world because I had a small business, and I had a man who approached me about buying into my business. And he was astonished that I was not tech savvy and even had a website or connected in any way to the internet. So that's how that started. So I was already at least a dozen years behind the times, even at that time.
I think we all are.
But yeah. So anyway, I'm like everybody else. I've got a fascinating story. I dare say that everyone that's ever lived, if they had the right editor, could probably produce a bestseller as to their autobiography and in a book form. But I maintain that with language and its adoption, this is man's oldest technology, we all became storytellers. And when we became storytellers, we also became liars. Because no matter what your intent is, when it comes to language as a facilitator of simple communication, we always must remember that the greatest lie of them all is the lie of omission. So anyway, I discovered this thing called Communitarianism. And I thought, well, I've never heard this word. And this is within...
You don't want to hear this word. You don't want to hear this word, Laurence. You don't want to hear it. Go on. Sorry.
Well, others have said, well, the word has a hex on it. And I think there's some validity to that statement. But I can tell you this, I'm just always been curious about things. And so, as I indicated before, I thought the internet was a very useful tool for getting some questions answered that I'd always had uh, uh, incomplete answers to, shall we say. Because as we understand, we look around us as we're progressing it through this thing called life, and we keep wondering what we're missing. What doesn't make sense? And so many things don't make sense, I think, for most of us. And so I saw a word, and when I was a young boy, like a lot of young children, they will pester the adults around them, their parents, their teachers, because they have questions, and they think, well, the adults, they've been around for some time. They should certainly be able to answer my question. Well, after a while, it gets to be a little bit much for parents, because they constantly have questions. They're always voicing those questions. They're quite unscripted in terms of how, they approach things. They haven't learned a lot of niceties and so forth immediately. And so my parents said, well, you know something? You have a dictionary. At a certain
Oh, it's
place.
dangerous. The
Well, and I
dictionary
was
learns for
taught,
you, teaches you to spell,
well,
cast spells, maybe.
my mother was one of these people that, she read Benjamin Spock. She was going to be the perfect mom. You see, we were going to have the perfect upbringing. It was going to be her task.
Mhm.
And especially since I came from a broken home. And so I was learning phonics at 3 or 4 years old at the kitchen table in the 50s. And so then when I got past the phonics part, then there was the dictionary. Go look it up. And then if you still don't understand, then come back to me with your question. You see? Then we had the encyclopedia. Then we had the Britannica encyclopedia. And so that's why it was ingrained in me that when I was confronted with this word, I said, what the fuck? What is this word? I've never heard anybody employ it in polite conversation. I've never read the word anywhere but here on this whiz-band thingy called the internet. And so I started an investigation. And so for 20 years, I've never stopped. And I can tell you, I learned about something called Google Alert early on. Google said that they will scour the internet for me and
Oh, yes,
inform
they
me
will. Of course they will.
who is using this word
And
and
why couldn't
where
you
and
trust
when.
them?
Well, I didn't know anything. I mean, I'm new to the internet, right? I always felt the whole culture was there was something sickening about it, though. I remember the gentleman that was wanting to buy half of my business. He wanted me to come into the 20th century and the 21st century. And I'm thinking, well, why do I need to do that? I mean, I know hundreds of people. They have my phone number. They know where I am. I do business with people all over the country. And I just have a phone. I have an address. I have an inventory. I have people that help me in the business. Why do I need a digital presence? But they assured me that the gentleman and his new wife were Iranian people. And they were very well educated. He had 2 degrees from Oxford. His wife was well educated. They had a blended family because her husband was a heart surgeon in San Diego and he passed away. And she had 2 small children, and then he had 2 small children from a previous marriage. So they joined forces here in Texas, and he wanted to have a business of some kind. And so even though he's well educated, he has difficulty with the English. It's a second language for him. And so people had difficulty understanding him. And so even though he had the credentials to get really good paying jobs, he was struggling. And so he asked me if I would hire him because he said he knew how to repair circuit boards. And at that time, I was getting equipment that was fitted with circuit boards. I sold food service equipment. So I've used the illustration before, and it's the truth. I said, well, can you fix that? And I pointed on my floor, because I had warehouses. And I said, that pizza oven is manufactured in Germany. It's a $30,000 or $40,000 piece of equipment. It looks brand new. It's barely used. I can't make it work. I was told it needs a new circuit board. The circuit board costs $1,800. But I'm fearful about springing for $1,800 if I don't know for sure it's going to solve the problem, because I just want the damn thing to work so I can sell it. Right? So I said, well, yeah, I think I can fix that. So over the course of 2 days, and it didn't look like he was doing anything at all, I kept thinking, I'm paying you $40 an hour to fix this, solve this problem of a circuit board. And you say you can repair it yourself. Well, he did. And so for the price of about $200, this man was able to repair this fancy pizza oven that had multiple decks, steam injection.
You're making me
temperature,
hungry.
The temperature goes up, to 1,000 degrees, which is what you need.
Pesto setting.
Yeah, and everything is push button. All you have to do is just push buttons, and you're going to get the perfect pizza.
Oh, lovely.
So I paid $500 for this boat anchor to take a chance on it. Okay. And I think I was able to sell it for like $6,500. So I'm thinking, which was a good bargain for somebody. It was somebody from out of state. And by then I'm selling things on eBay. Okay. And so I decided, well, I can make use of this guy. So we went this way. This guy would show up real quiet. I had a dozen people running around, repairing things, moving things, getting stuff ready, made ready, bench tested, etc. Because that's what I did, as I sold to startup bars and bakeries and butcher shops and food processing lines and things like that kind of equipment, anything related to food and machinery. And of course, I'm illiterate when it comes to anything mechanical. I have no interest in it and everything else. But to make a long story short, he came up to me one day and said, I'd like to talk to you. This is near the end of the day, the work day for everybody, around 5 o'clock. And he said, well, you don't know much about me, but my family emigrated to this country in 1979 when the Shah of Iran was deposed. And my father owned a lot of companies in Iran.
Mm.
He said, my family was like the Bechtel Corporation of Iran under the Shah.
Lot to lose.
So he said, but my mother stayed behind after most of my siblings and I left. He has a sister that was educated at the Sorbonne, and all of his siblings were very well educated because they had plenty of money to do this, and etc. And yet they were stripped of all their assets and properties under the Ayatollah Khomeini. Ayatollah Khomeini was living in a commune in the south of France prior to this incident. And if you're people that are old enough, remember that he was supposedly dying of cancer, and he was looking for anybody that would allow him entry so he could get advanced medical treatment. So he wound up in the States. At one time, he was in 2 other countries. He eventually died, the Shah of Iran. And I know I'm a little wordy, and I apologize for that. But
No worries at all. Hey, a lot of my crowd will have read my Pottinger pieces. The second one is about the CIA, the whole October surprise affair, and a lot of detail about Iran. So we already know a lot about this. We don't mind hearing history from people who lived
well,
during a time.
good.
So
That's good. Well, the Iran under the Shah. Remember, Mossadegh was overthrown in 1953. That was a CIA
it was
operation.
the largest funded CIA operation up until that point. It was something like they gave him 1 million, over 1 million, 1.5 million, something like that to do the operation back then. That's just crazy money.
Well, so anyway, I don't want to go off too deep off the deep end, but so we hired this. He recommended this young man to come in and help me, okay? Because we're going to put this entire business on the internet, okay? And I have $1 million wholesale value inventory, so it's a small business, okay? But I basically I was because I founded the business, I was basically the salesman, and I had two salespeople that were. One was 5 years older than me, and one was 12 years older than me, and they had a lot more experience in sales than I did. And they were well known in the city of Dallas and Fort Worth, this metroplex. But I made 95% of the sales because I knew the equipment like the back of my hand. I knew where it was located, you know. So we had to gather up things like specifications, pictures of this equipment before and after, ready for sale, history of its being bench tested, what parts were ordered for it, and these things. But basically, what I wanted was a tool for these salespeople that are forcing me to close 95% of the deals because their favorite comeback to a customer's query, whether in person or by phone, was, I don't know. And I used to tell them all the time, you never say, I don't know. This is not what you ever say. They're there because they want to know. That's why they're posing questions. This can't be. So in the hot summertime, the only thing that was air conditioned was this one office out of 5 buildings. Okay. And so everybody naturally wanted to, beat the heat and come into the office, get cooled down, because these big warehouse fans, they don't do it when the temperature is 100 degrees in August in Texas. And so I know these people work hard and I respect them. And so I'm not heavy-handed about any of these things, okay? A guy that smokes and 40 pounds overweight, he was one of my favorite guys. He was an Indiana farm boy. I mean, he was about as crude as you can imagine anybody to be. But he had a perspicacity about himself, and he could fix anything because he never stopped until he solved it has to be diagnosed what's wrong with something in case it doesn't bench test 100%. But anyway, so we bring in this 19-year-old boy. He's an albino.
Oh, wow.
That was interesting.
Always scared me
He's
when I was
very
young.
young. He's very young. He's very slight of build, very cheerful, but he's legally blind as well. So the gentleman introduces me to him and said, well, this is my friend. I've known him for a while, and he can help us. Well, over the next 18 months, I spent $180,000 to bring this business online. And don't forget, before I even met this gentleman, I had put forth a proposal to the city of Dallas in the year 2000 to do a company that was it was funded at $7.8 million, and we were going to bring a farmer's market sort of a thing, but with, we wanted to be able to compete with the finest food emporiums in the world. Okay, and they had a facility that was 35,000 square feet that was empty. They called it their international building. Nobody could make a business plan work because this is the city of Dallas is the managing partner. And as I was to learn, the development area itself was owned by Belgian bondholders.
That sounds like an insult, to be honest. Belgian bondholders.
Well, I'm learning a lot of things about this time, you see. So they called this an intermodal transportation zone. And I'm thinking, what the hell's that? And long story short, this young boy, very nice kid, okay, and a whiz on the computer. I mean, he got his face right up on the screen to even see it. Okay, I mean, on the screen practically, and still tapping away, fingers flying. And but he is this guy's a hacker. That's what he is. He's a hacker extraordinaire. And so, well, great, so he's going to take stock Google products or Microsoft products or whatever. He's going to rework them. He's going to go back in, back door, and he's going to retrofit the software, which is proprietary software, and he's going to change it, and he's going to make it fit my business for my salespeople and myself. So that if a customer says, well, I want a stove, or I want to buy a refrigerator, what do you have available that I can drive out to your warehouses and take a look at it and perhaps buy it? Well, I wanted to have it because I was told this internet was so wonderful. All you have to do is just click a few buttons on a keypad. The picture will come up, and they'll be able to, in real time, explain to the person on the telephone what's available and what his price was. All the selling points, what does it cost new? What does it cost, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that was an extraordinary experience for me. And the earlier experience with putting forth the city with a business plan to do something with this empty building, which is it's called the Dallas Farmers Market Improvement District. Okay, so it was right at the edge of downtown. And during the day hours, Dallas at that time had over 100,000 people. And there was no grocery store. Meanwhile, they had a vacancy rate on these office towers of 35%. So what they were thinking to do was to repurpose these skyscrapers to loft apartments for these young people that lived with the tech. They had the phones, the laptops, the computers. They did not cook. They ate out all the time. The average worker that actually lived in one of these pricey loft apartments was 35 years old, and they made $80,000 a year.
Do we call them trendsetters?
Yeah, well, they were, the young up-and-coming hipsters, that didn't understand why everybody wasn't jumping on board with this whiz-bang thing called cyberspace and the internet. And so they were quite enthusiastic, whereas someone like me was a dinosaur, you see, by comparison. But be that as it may, it didn't work. But what I did learn is about how, because I had to present this with the city of Dallas being the managing partner on the space and the ones that would be negotiating any lease terms for the building, et cetera, and the parking and things like that. They were the control, okay? They were the managing partners. Well, that's when I found out that the entire city, county government was taken over by communists.
Yeah, right.
And I'm in shock because I'm kind of an apolitical person. I don't give a damn who the mayor is or
what year is this exactly, just so that I can...
2000.
Yeah, I thought it would be about that. Okay.
2000, prior to 9/11.
Yeah.
So anyway, I won't go off in the weeds because I'm an old man. I've got lots of stories to tell, except to say that I had this experience behind me. Okay. So anyway, jumping forward by the end of 2005, I had dissolved the business. I decided not to go through with the proposed partnership and the startup of a new service company and all these other things, because I just decided, you know what, this is more than I want. Because, see, I like the idea that I could run this business like a guy that owned a garbage dump. You know, he had a few junkyard dogs, and he had a wad in his baggy pants, and he was out of business when he was out of money. Otherwise, if his wad was thick, he was alive. He was in business. He was ready to, and anybody that came up to him and approached him in his junkyard, he was, as people like, that. So I ran the business like that guy, or the guy that owned, what do they call it, where all the dead cars go? Is that
Scrapyard?
Yeah. Well, there's people
Scrappy.
that operate that way too. So that's how I viewed business, because, see, I never liked or trusted Uncle Sam since I first entered college
Probably
in
right.
1972. So I have no regard for Uncle Samuel. I don't know him. I don't want to contract with him. And along the way, I had to learn some valuable lessons.
Yeah, you
I
sound
owned
like
my
you're
first,
a libertarian on the leave me a fuck aloneism sort of
and,
front.
and I didn't even know what a libertarian was
Yeah.
at the time. I just know that when I went to college, I went for 2 years and I dropped out because I didn't want to be brainwashed.
Mhm.
You see what I'm honestly. In
You're
those years,
astute.
well, in those years, you had all the universities across the country had carte blanche with students for a democratic society and all the branches of the U.S. military to recruit on the campuses. It wasn't until years later that SDS was a Communist Party USA front organization. When in 1970, I was 16 that year, and I got my driver's license. I was formally adopted, and on my mother's birthday, which was April 22nd in 1970, that was the largest street demonstrations in U.S. history. It was called Earth Day, and Earth Day, unbeknownst to most people at the time, myself included, was actually the 100th year anniversary of Vladimir Lenin's birthday, April 22nd, 1970.
He was a Taurian.
So a few years ago, I have a friend locally. He's retired from the Dallas Cowboys, which is a professional football team. He went to Notre Dame. He's 6'9". He's the tallest guy ever to play in the league.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he's just a regular guy, but the fact he's 6'9", I feel like a midget when I'm with him in public, right? But be that as it may, we decided we were going to go to the festivities one year down at Fair Park, which is where Big Tex is, and the Cotton Bowl, and we're going to find out what Earth Day celebration was like in Dallas. So they had a lot of the universities represented that are well known to people in Texas and really across the country. And they had these booths, and they were explaining how they were going to make the world better. They're going to save the world. And so I said to Phil, why don't we just ask these professors, these college professors and these undergrad students that were, made up these contingents of small groups of people that had these various booths, because it's like a festival or a fair, it's there's all kinds of vendors and booths and this and that, companies as well represented. Let's ask them if they know that today is the anniversary of Vladimir Lenin's birthday. And we asked, and we had so much fun, because we asked at least a dozen of these very smart people, college professors, college grad students, and the like. Not a single one knew the answer to the question. When we told them, or when I would tell them, they just laughed like, oh, well, no biggie, you see. But that happened about maybe 10 years ago, here where I live now in Dallas. And of course, I live a mile from University of Texas at Dallas. Ghislaine Maxwell has two older sisters that are twins, one of whom is a professor here at the University of Texas at Dallas, a mile from me. And 3 miles away
is it Christine or is it Christine or Isabel?
Pardon me?
Is it Christine or Isabel?
It's Christine.
That one.
It's Christine, I believe, pretty sure. Anyway, so do you remember when Jeffrey Epstein was supposedly in prison and then he hung himself?
Yeah. I've done a lot of work on the Epstein case, so.
Well, there's a local man who's a podcaster who was actually filming him walking the streets of Dallas within a couple months after he supposedly offed himself. So he was making contact with Ghislaine Maxwell's sister and probably others in Dallas.
Are you saying Epstein was walking around in public? Do you know who the podcaster is?
I'd have to search my memory. I'm not even sure if he's still even a podcaster, but he seemed to have quite an audience at the time. And one of these days I will remember who he was, but I haven't really focused on that because to me, there's bigger fish to fry than all this. But to continue, Texas Instruments pioneered and developed the silicon chip. They anchor a huge tech corridor. And Texas Instruments is a huge campus, only 3 miles away from me. Okay, so we've got all this infrastructure now. Cell phone towers, LED street lights. And I live in suburbia about 2 short blocks to a country club and a golf course. Okay, and I'm one of the poor people that lives in this neighborhood because I basically, at the end of 2005, I was out of the system, you see, and so just living off of whatever funds I had, and I still to this day. And so I haven't had to work since the beginning of January 2006. So I thought, well, what do I said to myself, well, what can you do that's worth a damn or worthwhile? You don't have to work. You got enough money. So what can you do that might have give you some purpose in life and maybe do some good? And so that's when I became a full-time researcher without having to worry about where my next meal was coming from or
that's nice.
making a payroll on Friday or what have you.
Yeah.
I realized that very few people in life have this opportunity.
No, I can tell you it's bloody hard. I'm a full-time investigative journalist, researcher. I do all of the getting the stuff out there, but now finding a way to support yourself is very hard. I thank my supporters a lot for that reason.
Well, that's wonderful. I also had a marketing company once because I thought, well, if I can't beat them, maybe I'll join them. You see, and so I met a webmaster. The webmaster had earned like 180 grand the year before. He lived in a nice home. I was living in a nice home at the time. I called them McMansions, because it was Amitai Etzioni that coined the term McJob. So you can look that up. And so I thought, well, I live in a McMansion because what I discovered is I don't really own this son of a bitch. It's a joke. Had a homeowners association, which is very communitarian, by the way. It's a perfect example of a communitarian construct. So anyway, what happened to him is that he got addicted to something called Second Life.
the online.
This is my partner. This is my erstwhile partner. We actually formed the company, and we decided how we were going to earn our way. We were going to interview thought leaders who were unheralded. And the first man we selected was the Russian Jewish man who was the lead scientist of the Soviet Olympic teams for 17 years. So in the 90s, after Gorbachev emigrated to the States and was ensconced at the Presidio near San Francisco, he made a beeline to the States and was, he got jobs as a visiting or an adjunct professor and this and that. And I met him at a functional food conference, which wasn't something that my partner was particularly interested in, but I attended by myself nearby. A man who was a proponent for amaranth was the organizer, and he had people from all over the world at this little thing called a functional food conference. There's like maybe 40 people that attended, most of whom were from academia. And some of them were actually celebrities in their own right because they were foodies, shall we say, serious foodies and nutritionists and health food advocates, etc. Well, I started talking to him, and he somehow thought that I was part of the press, which is why I was there. In fact, the gentleman who just runs a store, I think he's Albanian or something. He's the one that organized the thing. He insisted that I should have a free pass. I shouldn't have to pay. And I said, well, great. So I went by myself. And that's where I met this man. His name is Morris Silber. 1 R, 1 S, Silber, like silver, but with a B as in boy. He has since passed away. So we were going to interview these thought leaders, and we were going to record our discussions. It was going to be structured, though. We would present questions to him in advance. And from there, we were going to transcribe the conversations, and then we were going to do the editing and create a book. And then we were going to, because, we were a marketing company, right? And so we were going to put this man's name on the map and help him sell a lot of his books, because what he was into was adaptogenic medicine. And the American European scientists, by and large, have eschewed the whole idea of having any validity or worthiness, in their canon of medical practice. Adaptogens are you can look them up, but the other thing we were going to do is we were going to produce a cartoon, a little serial, and we were going to give it away to anybody who wanted it. And we called it Mark and Lark, because my nickname was Lark, his name is Mark, and so we were going to have these panels, and he knew how to work Photoshop, and I was going to create the little script.
I would have called it malarkey all the way.
Yeah.
I have to say, or mucklarkey or something along those lines. Yeah, but go on.
So we're wasting a lot of time, and it's my fault because I talk too much. But,
no, you wasted time. Waste the time away. I'm fine with this.
So anyway, he got addicted to Second Life, and I saw the way he worked, as a webmaster. He hardly did anything himself. He hired people to do it. And then he would put some profit on top of that and then bill his clients, and everything was automated. And he had some important clients, that were major players in America and the world, because Dallas is a big city after all.
Hey,
and
you don't assassinate a president anywhere else, do you?
If you think he was assassinated.
Yeah. I mean, okay, there's a tongue in my cheek, may I say?
Yeah,
go on.
There you go.
Anyway,
yeah,
Dallas is a thriving place.
When that event occurred, I was 9 years old. And I just turned 9 in August, and the event occurred in late November of 1963. I was living in Okinawa, Japan at the time. So
down in Okinawa.
That's another story in of itself, because I love Japanese culture because of that to this very day.
Yeah.
It's why I got interested in Zen Buddhism back in like junior high and high school.
Yeah.
And my mother was an atheist, so we didn't have a Bible in our home.
We
You
can
know,
we can have long talks about Akira Kurosawa later, but you were saying about Dallas being quite wealthy. Back on the
yes,
story.
yeah, thank you. Well, so anyway, the guy made easy money. I mean, his customer base, they trusted him implicitly. You know, just one little change on a website could trigger a $300, $400 bill with no problem. And he was doing this with 25 or 30 accounts in his boxer shorts from home.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's got two children that are toddlers and a wife who is being neglected, who's now decided
Oh,
that
them.
she's going to get addicted to the bottle. So he's addicted to Second Life. She's addicted to the bottle. His world's falling apart. And so we decided, as gentlemen, we met face to face. It was a nice little spot, lots of greenery and
In
little
the real
cafes.
world, not the virtual world.
In the real world, yeah. We didn't live very
You
far
didn't
from
make
each other.
yourself an avatar. Go on.
So we decided that we would not go forward until at least he got his act together and got his marriage back on track, right? Anyway, I decided the technology was dirty anyway. There was something about it. And see, I studied as a copywriter because I was really interested in how to tell a story and how to make a sale and how to convince people to trade with me or my client. You see, why should you do business with me? There's a lots of competition, after all. So that's what copywriters do. And so, I mean, I had mentors like the man who founded Brass Check TV. His name is, I want to say, Kevin McCarthy. He was steering everybody to YouTube before Google bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to hear, nobody wants to read your long form sales letter. You need to do it with video. This is how you sell things today.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of the written word is yesterday.
I can't get away. I'm an addict. I'm an addict, I tell you.
So you understand where I'm going. And then, of course, everybody's into memes, but they've redefined what a meme is from what I understood a meme to be.
Oh,
You
what
know,
did
I
you
was actually
understand? Yeah, go
around.
on. Well, what
I
did
was
you
actually
believe?
around when the self-esteem was published.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I read it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, memetic engineering / warfare is the principal concern of big media and the Department of Defense here in the States today. That's available on my website. You can see it. The evidence is there. And, you know, I learned about cybernetics, cybernetic theory. I learned about things like, because I have a very curious mind, and I make no bones about that. I learned about convergence theory and social contract theory. And you know, I wanted to learn what the hell was happening in the world of politics because things are changing really fast. With the rapid pace of technological innovation, my
Mm-hmm.
world was being turned upside down.
Who was it being turned upside down by, though, at the end of the day? What were they using? What political methods were they using?
Well, it's all about communication. It's all about language, first and foremost. People ask me today, well, where do you see this evidence on the ground in the real world of communitarianism, communitarian law and its superimposition, and this new system of governance or management? Well, you see it in the language. Corporate speak, I call it geek speak, tech speak. You know, it's all coming together. And see, I tell people today, well, you know, the nation state is going bye-bye. It's thought obsolete. And in its stead, we already see the evidence for what's called the market or biosecurity state.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, we're seeing the rise of this data-driven smart city state. So that's an easy way to remember what you can easily see all around you if you look. You know, there is a movement afoot to undo the USA. The government has been bankrupted to its creditors since 1933.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you learn, when I've learned in this sense, I got online the real history of the country and the fact that we were spoon-fed a lot of bullshit and lies
When do
growing
you
up.
think when do you think a lot of what has been where we are now, when do you think it really started being constructed? When do you think the first moments that this modern communitarianism was not maybe given a name, but was seen distantly in the future by the
Well, this
intellectuals?
really goes back to the, you know, the mystery schools and the religions. I think Nikki Rapana traced it back to something called communitarian ray or ra, hyphenated. So that would be, uh, it goes way back. But
When we're saying Ra, are we talking about Egypt?
yeah,
Oh, right.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
yeah,
That's
or
pretty
even
far. Let's see if we're talking
e-
about Egypt.
e-
Yeah.
even Babylon,
Hmm.
the time. But
The modern
you know,
effort,
there's,
though, you know,
pardon me.
the modern effort to get, because I personally I'll taint this with a little bit of my view, then taint your answer with a little bit of my view, because I see it like being really in the middle 1800s. You start to see this move towards universities looking to create a new world, and then it being envisioned by everybody from Fabians to Masons all the way on and all the way upwards, until eventually we got through all of these kind of like pre paradigms, communism and fascism, and all of these things that would kind of be joined together to create communitarianism. And that communitarianism had like an evolutionary process that was like, that had to go from, probably really started fundamentally rolling from it like around the mid 1800s, and then really fast past World War II, etc.
I think that's fair to say. I think that's fair to say. I trace it back to really with the advent of agriculture,
Hmm.
you know, where man as a hunter-gatherer could now stay in one place and build villages. You know, people don't know this in Europe, but the smallest unit of political organization in places like France and Switzerland and Italy is in fact the commune. And a commune is just a walled village. That's what it is. The You know, goes back really to ancient Rome. We have the rise of the corporation and the trade union. So you had to organize people. So there's an entry at my website. It's called Medieval Feudalism versus Corporate Feudalism. So, I mean, you can see it in pictures and images. Uh, Ludwig von Mises wrote a book in 1958 called Human Action. He's a staunch anti-socialist. We have an institute now in Alabama named after him. He's from the Chicago School, so-called. That was Rockefeller funded.
Yeah, I always find
Right.
people who follow von Mises like on the edge, kind of every argument. They got like a really quirky little angle to everything, which is really clever. I like it. I like it, but I find a lot of it is how to bridge that divide that no one else can work out how to bridge.
The best part of it is the so-called non-aggression principle, in my view. That's really the best part. But see, these people are easily led too. They're fooled because I did a deep dive into the history of libertarianism. Because at one time I was thought, well, I don't know anything about what's going on, but there was a man named Ron Paul who was running for the GOP nomination in 2007 and 8. Then he did it again in 2011 and 12. Since that time, I realized that they had to introduce this thing called libertarianism into the conversation, into the national conversation, because the way they figured it out, they figured it is that the last dialectical conflict arguments would be between libertarianism. Remember, there are left and right aspects to libertarianism and communitarianism. Communitarian is called, they termed it the all-encompassing ism or school of thought, bearing in mind that within every school of thought, you will always find variance of opinion. So, and this goes to social contract theory and also convergence theory, which anybody can look up, online. But the libertarians wouldn't engage. They still haven't. There was stabs at it back in the 90s, I think. But it starts, of course, in the English. The word itself in 1841, when John Goodwin Barmby introduced the English to this French construct, and he's the one that introduced Frederick Engels to French communisme or communism. And of course, he was a patron to Karl Marx. So they were contemporaneous at the time. So the word was coined in 1841, and that's just the word. It's gone through many different interpretations of meanings and iterations since that time. But in earnest, in the contemporary times, it began with the publication of a book in 1971 by John Rawls called A Theory of Justice. And this is borne out by any reading of any encyclopedia, okay? But they were calling it, they didn't know what to call it, you see, because they were going to marry communism or socialism with capitalism or corporativism, you see, getting back to human action. Von Mises, in his book, described two forms of socialism that most people would not recognize as socialism. One was, he styled it as corporativism, which became corporatism. Mussolini said it was the more correct name for fascism, okay, because he was an advocate for that. But the other one is this thing called syndicalism, S-Y-N-D-I-C, syndic. Syndics of the Drapers Guild by Rembrandt is a famous painting that is reproduced on the inside cover of a Dutch master's cigar box. Mm-hmm. So you have to ask yourself, well, who were the syndics? These gentlemen in that painting didn't look to me to be people that were working with textiles or seamstresses, or they were not in the rag trade so much. These people were schemers and dreamers. And what they were principally interested in was controlling the market for textiles and materials. That's what they were all about. So a syndicalist is a trade unionist. Okay, we've had examples of these going back to at least ancient Rome, right? Along with corporations. You had to organize people, okay, to do big projects, especially public works projects, like the Roman highway system, the road system. That was one of the great legacies, their public works projects, etc. So a trade unionist, though, is not only blue collar, but a white collar person, okay? And so it goes back to the time of the medieval guild system in Europe, okay? And so it goes back at least until, 12th century, something like that. It's evidenced today in London, for example, the Worshipful Order of the Bankers. Mm-hmm. That's a closed shop trade union. You've got the teachers union, the dock workers, the steel workers, the automakers, all these specialized, and there are literally thousands of them.
Once upon a time, you had the Merchant Adventurers Company. Yeah.
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 The Mercers, the lorry drivers. I mean, it goes on and on and on of these different groups that are just organized because, of course, they're said to be organized for the benefit of the people that are within those industries. They're tradespeople or they are doing business within. But what most people don't understand is that there are white-collar trade unions too. And remember, syndicalism was always felt to be a replacement for capitalism. That's how it was imagined early on and through its development over history. So in the States, you've got the National Governors Association. Well, that's a closed shop trade union. Then you've got the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Well, that's a closed shop trade union. How about the American Planning Association? How about the American Psychiatrists Association? How about the American Medical Association or the American Bar Association? And see, what I've noticed over time is how these workers, these, and even the so-called machinists, as I termed them, that would be the people that make their living as chief information officers of corporations. They're well educated, quite facile in the use of the language of the internet and how to make it work for corporations, etc. Is you have groups like the ISO, IEEE, IEET, and especially Unidroit, UNIDROIT. And you can see how they're ushering in communitarian law, which is the law of the European Union. In the French, acquis communautaire. In the English, direct translated, it's communitarian law. And yet, it's still astonishing to me that not enough European peoples, including Brits, are even discussing this. Because under communitarianism, see, nobody has rights that are unaccompanied by duties and responsibilities. It's camel's nose under the tent, you see? Because here in the States, we grew up thinking, well, we've got the greatest country in the world, and we've got this Bill of Rights, and we've got free speech, and we can have guns, and we're not to be subject to unlawful searches and seizures and all this crap. But see, all that's gone by the wayside. Because in this country, since 9/11, a coup d'etat on America and the world occurred. And since the passage of the Patriot Act, all law in the country, for example, is communitarian law enforcement. The Constitution is not even recognized in a court of law. So it went by. See, we don't have a lawful government of, by, and for the people in this country. And the same is true where you are right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because there's been an overlay and a superimposition of EU-style law worldwide in a hyper-connected world. This technology necessitated wholesale changes in patent, trademark, and copyright law, even the law of contract. The law of contract never goes away. Always keep that in mind for you and your listeners. So,
well, just to make a note to people, one of the people who were during the late 90s and early noughties, who was, of course, turning in the edge circles with people like Jeffrey Epstein and others, was Nathan Myhrvold, who owned Intellectual Ventures, which owned at one point 7,000 something patents and patent pendings of really, really important patents as well. And that was something we didn't really understand what was happening at the time. But these people are more subversive than we think, and they're more organized than we think.
well, and you think about all the people that began their careers and made their names from the times that they served in the patent office. You know? So anytime you look at a person in your history books that is well known and they worked for a time in a patent office, then you can see the skullduggery that occurs from that. But yeah. So anyway, there's a man named Ken Dost, D-O-S-T, D as in David. He has a Facebook page. He lives in Portland, Oregon. He's an architect. He's actually pretty well versed in this thing called patent, trademark, and copyright law. If you ever want to reach out to him, or, I mentioned his name. I've never talked to him or met him. We're friends on Facebook. But he's a man that's probably in his mid to late 70s now. But he knows what he's, and I have a very good friend who's also in his mid to late 70s as an architect here in Texas. I had to teach him about Christopher Alexander and who he was. Christopher Alexander uh, was a consultant to the American Planning Association for years. He developed something called pattern language. He was an architect of the internet. What we know today is the internet. And as an aside, he was the man that actually designed Alex Jones' home that he lost to his first wife in the divorce. Go figure.
There you go. Yeah.
So anyway, my friend in Texas, that's the architects, he's taken property rights cases to the Texas Supreme Court 2 or 3 times. So the Texas Supreme Court basically says that you don't own property. You don't have property rights anymore. So what do you call a man who cannot own property under the law?
Serf. Let's go with, shall we go with serf or slave? Which one?
Either or works for me.
Yeah.
You see? So this is what we stand to lose. There's only 3 words to remember, and I keep trying to tell people this is not rocket science. Don't make it so. I've been talking about this publicly for 16 years. No one gives a rat's ass. I'm nobody special. But they they're target fixated on just whatever, and so they don't want to look at a larger picture. They understand that, like when I first got online and I signed up for Google Alerts, I got 15 hits a day via email of all these places where the word communitarian or communitarianism, communitarian law was being employed. I mean, I was being assaulted by all of this. I couldn't believe it because nobody I knew a damn thing about it. And I generally tried to, especially in those years, tried to associate with people that were smarter than me. Because I want to learn. I'm always interested in learning things, you see. Mm-hmm. And I have very few friends today, but they all are smarter than I am, and they're all a lot richer than I am.
Yeah, so you're a lot more charming than they are by the sounds of it.
Well, I'm like a gadfly. I'm like the guy you don't really invite into your real social circles. My friend that retired from the football team, he hangs out with billionaires now because he had a degree in finance. He just wants to know where to preserve his wealth. He's got 2 grown boys, both in tech, and he's got plenty of money to do whatever he wants. But right now he's just hunker down, and he doesn't want to gamble any money unless he could make it easy, no risk profit. Mm-hmm. And this is how well-to-do people roll anyway. And I've known this for many years anyway, too. But other people think, oh, well, gee, Laurence, you might say something to my friends that will upset them. Because I have this habit of kind of speaking my mind no matter where I go.
Hey, I'm there with you, buddy.
And it's not like I'm a nasty, uncouth fellow. You know what I'm saying? But at some point when we get past the niceties, I'm wondering, well, can I make a connection with this person or not? There's no sense beating around the bush. I don't want to sleep with you. I don't want to steal your money. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to make a human connection. I want to know if there are still signs of intelligent life.
It's hard to find nowadays. It's hard to find because people are stuck in a. I want to ask you something in particular. I've been doing a load of work. I kind of went through history, went back in time, and moved my way forward into creation of the New World Order under people like Kissinger and others, and how, the formation of things like CIA, CFR, and it going on, and I'm really interested in the political side of it and how the modern politics has been kind of formed to create a support for communitarianism and to make sure that the politicians have to go to a certain area because it's a very center ground sort of idea. And so recently I released an article called The Third Way Dossier, which was about Blair and Clinton, of course, adopting Anthony Giddens' philosophy of third way politics. And that was really like the third way is a way to marry up the contradictions between the center left and center right. And that leads to then all of the power being in the center and left being purged constantly, and sometimes the right wing being purged too. And so is that lending, have these things been introduced to make it easier for us to go into this future world of communitarianism? Because that's what it seems. And even some of the language of people in like the 90s who were implementing this, and then the people who were going on, it sounds very much like they knew there was some form of globalism, and there was a lack of questioning of what the overarching political ideology of their form of globalism would look like. Was that always communitarianism?
It's what has morphed and become present day communitarianism, because communitarianism is the watchword for today, because it's undergirded by communitarian law, and it's just that simple. If you have a multinational corporation in Germany that has a contract to do business with a multinational corporation in the States, and in turn they have a fulfillment contract with a multinational corporation in the People's Republic of China, and a dispute or conflict should arise requiring adjudication in a court of law, which law will hold? Years ago, you actually had codicil or contract clause that said supremacy of communitarian law. This is the law that's practiced at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. For instance, Slobodan Milosevic was tried under communitarian law. He died incommunicado in prison, and then he was found innocent after he passed in that tribunal. And so really it's like a kangaroo court. Okay, it's not just law enforcement, it's the court system has given over to this. Don't forget, in a communitarian or in a communist system, the idea was to attack first the bourgeoisie. You have four groups. From the top, you have the intelligentsia, nomenklatura, bourgeoisie, and then the proletariat. In this system, what we're witness to today is the bourgeoisie is being gutted, dispossessed of their wealth, their assets. They now join the ranks of the proletariats, or the wage slaves, the landless, the propertyless. Meanwhile, the nomenklatura is expanded. This is the bureaucracy, which protects the intelligentsia at the top from the burgeoning ranks of the landless and the propertyless that are now dispossessed of their wealth and joining the ranks of the proletariat. They insist on this firewall because, of course, where does this wealth accrue to? The intelligentsia at the top. So this whole thing was devised by people of transgenerational wealth. They probably had wealth in their families for a couple hundred years. Okay, and they're trust fund babies. Okay, remember, there was a man named Zygmunt Dobbs who wrote a book in 1960, and it was called Keynes at Harvard. John Maynard Keynes. Economic deception as a political credo. And in it is described an address that Keynes gave before the Harvard University student population post-World War II. And essentially what he said that the Marxian socialists had it all wrong, because their appeal was to the laboring classes. They had the numbers. Okay, it was easy to agitate these people. They're not that well educated, but we have lots of numbers. And so if we can assemble them with pitchforks before the castle or the palace, We could storm the Bastille and we could change the order of the day that way, sheer force. But the Fabian socialists said, no, the better way to do this is to target, to engineer the buy-in with the trust fund babies, the beautiful people, the people that are easily led, the people that you can pay them to be your spokesperson. You know, these are people that are trapped. You know, they're in a career field. They have credentials. They have reputations to hold onto. So they would attach themselves to the prominent and the well-to-do. And these are the people that they would enlist as Confederates to their task of overturning the system. Mm-hmm. So all these people that are attached to big media, they're in the universities, they're in the think tanks, they're attached to these foundations. Even the highest ranks within groups like the military, Wall Street, finance, recording industry, entertainment, Hollywood. These are the people that will do anything for a buck because this is the way they have been taught to navigate this thing called life all their years. And so they're the easiest people. So what you have in place today is a system of what others, wags, have described, and I use this in my parlance, I call it the 5B hustle. 5 words that begin with the letter B.
Bugger,
and that would be bribe.
Bastards. Sorry.
Well, basically, how do you deal with these people that you're trying to enlist
Yeah.
for your cause? You see,
I can see where you're going. Bribes, blackmail,
bully.
Oh, bully is a good one.
Banish.
Oh,
and then
definitely.
bury.
Oh, yes. We all know
bribe, blackmail, bully, banish, and bury.
Oh.
So all these people that are being appealed to, okay, a contract is in the offing. The threat is an applied one, that if you don't agree, then you're going to be ostracized. You're going to become a nobody. You're not going to have your name up in bright lights where you need it to be, obviously, because you make your money dealing with the public in some way. Your name is Tucker Carlson or Elon Musk, or you're some, you got some cachet and name recognition in your field. That's how they do it, because there's nobody that rises through the ranks of their chosen profession that is not going to be playing ball. Because the last thing a group needs is somebody that's got their own mind and their own thoughts, and they will actually express themselves and exercise themselves upon their own thoughts. They're basically groomed to be good team players.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are.
And that's how they can easily take over the world, which is what's happening today.
I do try and explain that in a lot of my work. A lot of my work is focused at how they created a leadership group that was really fundamentally under control very early on. How they, and that tied up with the operations in Egypt to depose King Farouk and Mossadegh in Iran afterwards. A lot of that was starting to see how they could install leaders, how easy it would be while they started training up leaders through leadership programs like Kissinger's International Seminar. And these people, I mean, the people you're talking about there, Keynes and others, they're massively important to the intellectual community around that time that grew up learning Keynesian economics and then going on to learn post-Keynesian economics. I mean, these were the top brass and the big thinkers. And this is like, where is this leading in our world now, where we've got obviously a lot of complications? Where is this all leading? Is this leading to the megacity world of the future that's almost identical to the one that Elon Musk would make, as it is to the one that the World Economic Forum makes? Are all roads leading to Techno-Rome?
We have to be cognizant of the fact that we are in a time of asymmetric war. The war is upon us, whether we want to realize it or not. It's a chemical war, a biological war, it's a cybernetic war, a cyber war, it's a psychological war, it's a spiritual war, it's a socioeconomic war, it's lawfare. So we're being poisoned, literally, in every which way imaginable, and for most people, in ways even not imaginable. Okay, we have this discussion of bio-digital convergence today. The tech is out of control. The tech crazies have been unleashed upon us. People, they feel like they do not have the chops, but to bow to the expert and the expert's opinion about things. I've been warning since I was a teenager about the American hospital system. It's totally corrupted. You cannot trust a white coat. You cannot trust an attorney, a lawyer, a politician, or a judge, because today the courts are working against the people. Nothing makes sense. Okay, you are literally surrounded by zombies and criminals who probably don't realize that they're zombies, and certainly don't realize that they're part of a criminal protection racket. So what's happened is the mafia has taken over your town, and they want you to pay, and you have a little shop, okay? And this is how you put bread on the table for your family. But somebody shows up and says that, well, we're going to protect you because, look what happened to your neighbor down the street. His business caught on fire, and he was inadequately insured. And I wouldn't want that to happen to you, but so we're going to protect you. We've got insurance industry today. See, that's all part and parcel of this whole financial system. They work together. It all emanates really in the world today from the City of London, in my view.
Yes, sir.
But
I've talked with other people who believe that too.
yeah,
I personally am not sure that. I think because we're entering into a world of globalism, I think some of this has been split up and put into many different hands, and it will never return to the same main source.
no. However, what I try to tell people that it might be useful to consider is that you need to take yourself back to the time when you were 8 and 9 years old. Before you were too terribly socialized, before you had any kind of a vocabulary to speak of. In fact, I coined a word years ago, and the word is vocabularity. You're welcome to use it. The singularity, if you will, and vocabulary. So I don't consider that language is the measure of a man. I think that genius today is in a paucity of language. Okay, so when you were 8 and 9 years old, whether you're a boy or you're a girl, you're saying to yourself, wow, this is a fantastic thing, this thing called life. I'm here, I'm in it. And this is so exciting. Now, it doesn't matter what your home circumstance, there might be terrible, but you knew that there was something about this experience called life that you wanted to entertain. And you wanted to find fulfillment. You wanted to find your place in this thing. You believed in love. You think, well, I know I can fall in love because I felt it around certain people. I felt my heart skip a beat. And that's fantastic. And I had this meal that was so ethereal. It was so delicious that I want to experience that again. And you had wonderful conversations and playtime with your friends at the playground in the schoolyard, and yet you had the schoolyard clashes too. You had the same kind of things that all young people go through, but still in your mind, when you got away from all the buzzing confusion, the sibling rivalries, and your mom and dad breathing down your neck, and you had a chance to think for yourself. This is what we all need to do. And then we're going to realize all the things that we bought into that have complicated our lives beyond this ideal that we once imagined for ourselves. So I say to people, well, you can visit my website. There's an entry, it's called Trust Your Gut, where I say that this idea of trusting your gut is actually more hardwired into who we are than any kind of thing having to do with language. So before language, there was another you see? And I don't do labels very well, personally, okay? Because that doesn't serve my purposes. It makes no sense for me to constantly adopt a label or even allow someone to attach a label to me. But the other one is called 9 words, and that's just my blueprint for how it is that you begin the exercise to extricate yourself from communitarian code speak, that entrainment, that assault upon your mind that's occurring at all times, 24/7, as well as what I call slave speak. So what I always tell people that might be useful is to revisit the keywords being The Anatomy of Slave Speak by Frederick Mann. It was copyrighted in 1997, and read it 5 times until you understand exactly every single word that was imparted on this one essay. Okay? Because there's people that are mentioned that were advocates, proponents. You know, people like
it's
Alfred.
a form of behavioral economics, really, like the nudging.
It is. And then the other one is called Chinese Contracts by Jim Bullock. And this is a 5-minute read. The first is maybe a 10 or 15-minute read. But the point is, read that 5 times too, at least, until you get it. And then you realize that you really do have the ability to fashion this thing called life and the experience you have of it, and get to that point. But the truth is communitarianism is so pervasive today. And as I said, you're surrounded by zombies and criminals. It isn't going to be, the one that's going to direct you into the FEMA camp at the point of a gun is going to be the kid that used to mow your grass up the street.
Rolf in Sound of Music. Yeah. Oh, you can't trust Rolf, I tell you.
Yeah. So anyway, these are just exercises that I recommend for people, because then you're going to realize what matters. For heaven's sake, what matters? And then you realize that it's so easy to get, to go off into the weeds, to be drawn down a primrose path, to experience the bandwagon effect. Well, who is in charge? Who has the highest claim of authority? Where's the line stop? Where's the buck stop? In my life, I'm the expert. Not you, not King Charles, not Trump, not the Pope. It's not some rabbi. I'm the expert. Mm-hmm. Nobody else. Okay? And you realize that this system it's designed to breed independence right out of you. So it's all about codependence, dependence, and interdependence. Well, what happened? Because you've allowed yourself to be misled. And so I keep telling people as well, be your own expert, because you really are the only expert that counts at the end of the day. And realize, if you go through that exercise, that you're going to have to repurpose your life in ways that allow you to truly be independent. How can that happen? Well, it can. It's real simple. You take yourself back to that 8 or 9-year-old, and you just follow the bouncing ball with the prompts. Now, if you don't like my blueprint, well, design your own. It's pretty simple. But the bottom line is that if you knew nothing else about this life, except trusting your gut, and you're not very smart, you're not educated or anything else, you realize that, well, I get thirsty. And my stomach says that I'm hungry, you see? And it starts there. If you cannot feed yourself and water yourself, then you cannot possibly be independent. Law of contract never goes away, which means when you follow the exercise, you realize that the most important trading partners, because see, we are a sociable creature by nature. We have to pick and choose our trading partners wisely at the end of the day. And that's why this little essay called Chinese Contracts is so important, because it talks about how do you have the very best kind of a contractual relationship with another human being, or even any kind of being or biological entity. It starts with that. And then you realize that this is not a tough thing. It can be done. But the only way that we're going to have any genuine pushback and resistance to this onslaught, this emerging global system of governance, with this tech, what the tech craze is unleashed upon us, is to have these conversations with yourself and realize that if you really set your mind to it, that you can get to the point where what these people have to say means nothing to you. They are battling for mind space in your mind, and you don't want them. I'm sorry, you have nothing to impart to me. I don't watch TV. I don't read the local newspaper. I don't care who is running for office and why. I'm aware of these things where I live, because I just have this curious bent about me, and it's just nonstop. But along the way, I had to learn how to become independent again and not give over my natural curiosity. And
There
my
you
take
go.
on things.
I think isn't that what it is? What you've described to me is, and I was thinking it all the entire time you were speaking there, is just the refining your curiosity, but of that almost innocent, the acceptance that you do not know everything at a natural state. So you're finding proper innocent curiosity rather than what we often do, which is we're only curious about what will distract us because we no longer appreciate we're scared to find out that we don't know the information. So we stay in the world that we know rather than the world that we don't know. And we reject curiosity, and we need to refine the curiosity towards things we do not know rather than just the continuous staying in the box, movies, TV series, music droning away at you. Whatever's been selected and put on your screen is a thing that you click. And I have very good, very intelligent friends who click, 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 click. And I even find myself doing it at times. Just you do what the algorithm tells you to do. And it's such dangerous. It's almost like we've been put on course ourselves to humanity's at the end of humanity, where we hand over to technology and we create ourselves into technology until we're no longer there, and it's just technology on its own. Is that a too depressing of you, or am I probably looking into the future about right at the moment?
Well, I want to address that,
Okay,
seriously. However, I want to tell you a story, if you don't mind.
please do.
It goes going back to 1981. I'm married to the Christian girl for 5 years. She walks out on me on our 5th wedding anniversary. On this date, in August of 1980, I had to cater a party at a restaurant in which I was the executive chef. I had a staff of 17. The restaurant was 2 stories, valet parking. It was just rated the #2 restaurant in the Dallas-Fort Worth area by the Dallas Morning News. So it was a very hot ticket. And so they had televised and conducted the Miss America pageant in downtown Fort Worth at the Tarrant County Convention Center. It was televised nationwide, after which they convened at this restaurant in which where I was employed. And so, it was all the contestants, their parents, the television people, the sponsors, et cetera, et cetera. And so I couldn't get out of it. So the second year in a row, because of the industry that I was in, my Texas Christian wife from a very small town, I met her on her summer break from Oklahoma Christian College. She just turned 18. I was, I didn't turn 21 until after I got married. Okay. But so I was head over heels in love with her. Okay. I mean, she was beautiful. She didn't know she was beautiful. Honestly.
Dangerous.
So she decided that after the second year in a row, I couldn't take her out for our anniversary dinner because I had to work. Was unsettling, so she ran home to mama. So anyway, moving on with the story, I couldn't escape because this restaurant and its reputation and mine were tied at the hip. See, people that are in the food service industry that are European trained, they want to make a name for themselves. You have to make a name for yourself because that's how you sell yourself. You don't make the big money, okay, unless you have a reputation and a name. And at that time, I'm being interviewed. I get my picture in the paper. I'm a kid. I'm 26 years old. So moving forward, a year later, I'm asked to cater an event that was titled Creativity, the Human Resource at a museum, 2,000 people. And these people are paying big money just to even attend. And the keynote speaker was R. Buckminster Fuller. And what did Fuller say? Remember, creativity, the human resource. Still have pictures of that event. With the money I earned, I had a new girlfriend and I moved to San Francisco. From San Francisco, I moved to Portland. From Portland, I moved to Seattle. In 1990, I moved back to Texas. But Fuller said, to paraphrase, he said, you're not going to change anything within the existing paradigm. If you want to change anything, you need to create a new model, rendering the old model obsolete. Now, that's the one that stayed with me all these years, okay? However, he said, I learned about a new one just within the last year that stuck with me. And I researched what other people's take was on this quote, because it's even shorter and it's quite memorable because of its paucity of words in the language. And it's simply dare to be naive. Mm. Dare to be naive. And this was an incredible revelation for me. Because, of course, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, people revered this guy, Buckminster Fuller. Even though he had socialist leanings, he was quite the prolific inventor. He was much lauded in the press everywhere he went. And he wasn't, as a figure, he wasn't particularly, he wasn't a tall man or a big man or a loud man, but he was a public intellectual, sort of like a Marshall McLuhan, or back in his day, the Huxleys and et cetera, And, but dare to be naive. Mm. I love that because I think that's what's going to have to happen. I want to personally say that I intend to be off the internet by the end of the year. Mm. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be successful. Okay. I keep trying to find people. I'll be happy to pay them. I want to be schooled by people that know, because you already know that I'm illiterate. I have avoided learning how to operate this machine as much as I possibly can over the years. I know how to search. I have email accounts and the usual kind of things. But that's why when I formed that marketing company back in 2006, I got with a webmaster because I didn't want to deal with the mechanics of a machinist. I wanted to be able to use the medium in a different way without having to get bogged down about how to work the fucking buttons. I don't want to learn how to work the buttons to this day. And so, that's why I say that, I'm surrounded by tech crazies. And so anyway, I don't know where we were going, but I just wanted to insert that into our conversation.
No, it was the point of refinding your innocent curiosity and the fact that dare to be naive. And I remember fully the moment, and you said that's an important moment for you. I can completely sympathize with that. It was I realized probably when I was about in my late 20s, early 30s, that I was scared of finding out new information if it was going to break my paradigm. I realized it. I realized that if every time I looked at something and I knew that it could potentially change some view I've got, I'd kind of like wince and cringe at the screen, knowing that I'm going to find out information I don't. And when I found out that I was wrong about things, it really had a big effect when you realize your worldview is changeable, and you accept it. And so I accepted it. At one point I was just like 2014, 15, I couldn't hold back from it anymore. I had to just accept. I have to take in as much information. I was already doing it. I was already breaking the rules, but there were certain areas I was scared to go, and I just like went past those areas and just accepted that I did not know. And I always assume that I know less than the other person I'm speaking to, and I always look to learn. I always accept that there's going to be loads of things I'll learn from reading a book about a subject I know inside and out. And it may be just one thing, but it's just always trying to draw in knowledge and information. And I wonder if the reason why we have to fight right now against the technocracy is because that's what they're taking away from us. They're taking away our ability to make our own decisions. They're making technology make decisions for us.
They're dead set. They intend to make us their slaves. Now, they're going to dispossess you of your property, your assets. You will not have rights. Everything will be conditional access. Because these people of transgenerational wealth, they can't imagine anything more beautiful than a world that's run by a machine that they own. And that's seriously where we're going. Mm-hmm. It's more economical. It's more efficient. So this is where they're dead set. And anybody that's going to help and that they can enlist to that cause, they're going to elevate them. They're going to make good money, and they're going to be welcomed, and they're going to be lauded, and they're going to be rewarded. But at the end of the day, not only is language a technology, but so is this thing called money. Okay? And the money will be programmable. Your behavior will be controlled. Your thoughts will be controlled. And these people are dead set. There's a man by the name of Perry Marshall, who was an early internet guru selling Google. You got people on the idea of Google AdSense for people that were like me, that had never been online before, but they had profitable, well-known brand name companies that they were in charge of, and they want to enter the computer age, and they want to navigate it properly. So this man, Perry Marshall, has a brother who was a Jesuit priest. He's been in China for many years. Apparently grew up in a family that was Roman Catholic. And so they had these eschatological conversations at the dinner table when he was growing up. And then he became a multimillionaire as a internet guru of sorts. a la Kevin McCarthy. That's his first name, I think, of Brass Check TV. Well, these are the people I was studying back in the day when I was trying to learn about this thing called the internet and how to navigate it and how to reinvent myself, perhaps, as a copywriter. Because I like the language, I like words, I like to write, and I like poetry. Anything have to do with the language, I like it, you know. And I was a crossword puzzle aficionado as a boy into my adulthood. So he has teamed up with a man named George Church.
Ooh, here we go. Yeah, that's
Harvard.
interesting. Also,
The
Edge
transhumanist.
Foundation.
I'm sorry?
Also, Edge, which was Jeffrey Epstein funded, John
Indeed.
Brockman led organization.
So, you know, also this gentleman named, I want to say, Edward Noble from the Royal Society in England.
Another people I've looked into in some of my
There's
articles.
a really nice company of folks, okay? And you can look these names up, okay? And just put the names Perry Marshall and George Church. So, well, they're going to find God. And it's going to be in a computer code. That's where they're going to find it, with ones and zeros. Okay, and this is astonishing to me. Because again, I keep asking, why is there no pushback? Why no resistance to this agenda? What the hell happened? What happened to traditional morality? Well, I learned back in the 70s that went by the wayside, because people had this convenient way of separating themselves from what they did to earn their livings with what they professed to believe in the church pews. I was always fascinated by this idea. See, that's a kind of virtue signaling to attend church, because, you know, in the 70s, I noticed that people were passing out their business cards furiously after the service. And then they had this fish magnet on their bumpers. And I remember the Jesus freaks when I was attending college. And they, you know, regular people my age, were sitting around in a circle on the ground, looking like Jesus freaks, and other ones look like my ex, you know, from the small Texas town, you know, the strong Christian girl, you see, and they're exchanging thoughts and ideas. So I saw it happening there. But, you know, you can do a search for something called John MacArthur, M-A-C, John MacArthur Exposed.blogspot.com, and just read it. Only take you about 10 minutes. And you can learn about the church growth movement. You can learn about Peter Drucker, Amitai Etzioni, and what happened to the so-called church. But see, this is what's happening to all the faiths with these interfaith dialogues, beginning with the National Council of Churches and the World Council of Churches. And then you can see how the language is going to get people to accept this new gestalt, this paradigmical shift of not only our realities, but our consciousness. And they're doing it with language. People are being bamboozled. They're being played. They're being deceived.
Fallacies are plenty.
They're being buffalo jumped to the edge of a cliff so that the Plains Indians can harvest your bones, your hide, and your meat so that they can survive the winter. And this is what's happening. And I don't know if I can make real connection with the locals where I live, but I would invite you to read my Facebook page, because that's my only recent offerings the last couple of years or so online, and learn about what I learned at this thing called Freedom in the 50 States, and how this gentleman, who's the president of something called the I'll think of it again. It's the oldest economic think tank in the country. It was founded in 1933. It's called the American Institute of Economic Research. And it's this local group that I joined called the Dallas Bastiat Society. Because you remember the libertarians were quite fond of Frederick Bastiat. and people like Etienne de la Boétie, the discourse on voluntary servitude. Bastiat wrote something called The Law. And so these were heroic figures to me as well. So they're going to change their name to the Harwood Salons beginning the first of the year. But during the presentation by the president and his research assistants, both PhDs from Massachusetts, flew all the way to Texas to tell us, dumb Texans, what's going on. And I'm not even really a Texan, but I've lived here a long time, okay? But read that. It'll take you about 2 minutes, 3 minutes to read it. He ranked Texans overall of all the 50 states, number 17. Well, that was revelatory right there. But in the category marked personal liberty, Texas and Texans ranked dead last.
Oh, really?
Out of all 50 states. And I thought, wow, yikes. And then I got 2 questions in just before they were going to wrap up. Remember, there was like 50, 60 people at this luncheon at a very Tony address. The buffet's on the house. And it was like a country club or a resort hotel setting, okay? And you're up in the sky, and people are wearing, the girls are wearing their power suits, and the gentlemen are in coat and tie, except myself, a few others. And the place was, they were all complete strangers to me, because even though I joined this group 4 years ago, I've only recently finally decided that I'm going to engage. So I've been to 3 meetings prior to this luncheon. But my 2 questions were, well, what about the social impact bond investment climate? Can you address that? And so he fast talked for about 3 minutes before admitting that it was all based on ESG scoring. Mm. Environmental, social governance. This is the way of all the corporate world today. People don't realize, where did this thing called the social impact bond emanate from? Well, let's try with Sir Ronald Cohen in the UK. And let's get a read on this, because people need to understand that we have a new economic system that is coming into play.
Yeah.
And that goes to this programmable money and conditional access.
And parceling off every single tiny bit of land and all of its resources, and making sure that it can map out exactly what it can take from us in every single facet of our life. I mean, it's just unbelievable how deep they're reaching into not only our pockets, not only our behinds, maybe our souls. It's
yeah. But see, we have to get the grasp of some of the details, not all of them, because after a while it's like, you're under assault, and you've got to hunker down and avoid it just to preserve your sanity, right? Especially if you're on the fucking internet all day. Yeah. And certainly I've been addicted to it for all these years. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is break the addiction, because honestly, I just don't think there's any other way. I honestly do not think there's any other way.
I don't think I can get, because of where I am, what I do, and everything. I can never seem to break the addiction, but the addiction has changed. I think most of my dealings online are communicating in some way, and maybe asking questions and getting answers, and not spending all the time on the stuff that's just brain rot. But I'm stuck on there. I'm still, I would be a far way from coming off completely, because, well, what can you do? This is the internet era. If you gotta create a sort of a business, if you've got to make your money and stuff, I mean, it's a hard world to be in the real world. The people I see in the real world are the ones who have got real world businesses that aren't connected to the online world. They're really suffering. They're really going through hardship. They're hanging on, but it's clear that everybody is being pushed to be online, and
Well, I mean, two occupational groups that I am particularly not fond of that would be the medical professionals and the legal professionals, they're going away too.
Mm-hmm.
Who needs a lawyer when you got an avatar on a screen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, who needs a doctor? You know, when something on an avatar on the screen can tell you what's wrong with you and what's ailing you, how to fix you up. You know, they'll even deliver someone to your door, you know, to administer you. You see, I mean, the second question I had for the president, he said that he was going to allow his research assistant because it was the harder question. So I asked him, I said, you know, in light of the fact that Texas ranks dead last for personal liberty of all the 50 states, what do we think is the effect of these so-called green technologies, genetics, robotics, information, and nanotech? Well, guess what? He decided he was going to abort that and close out the discussion, his presentation, because we were 30 minutes long, as it was already. But you know what? After that experience, the people I was around were all strangers. One lady who obviously, see, most of these people were of the investor class. Mm-hmm. They were not only well-read, probably well-educated, but they were well-heeled. Okay, there was a few millionaires in that room that wanted to hear what this gentleman, who's the president of the American Institute of Economic Research, had to say. And but I was very casual. I made a beeline for the elevator because I was needing a smoke really bad. Mm-hmm. But in my heart, in my mind, I was saying success. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to see some of those people in subsequent meetings. Okay. At some point, I'm going to, now the one time I had a discussion with an engineer, and then at the same previous meeting, which was a casual thing on another Tony address at one of those rooftop bars, you know, that's got the glass open and it's a nice day, nice night. And it's very casual, right? So you get out there with your margarita, you know, or whatever, and you chit chat with some strangers. And the first one that I made friends was at the bar, and he is a professor of economics at SMU, local college. I thought, great. Then the second guy I made contact with is an engineer, had his own business. You know, obviously well-to-do, well-educated man. And the first guy that I made contact with was the youngest member of the group. He's only 32. He's a social studies teacher at a local high school. So, I mean, you know, I'm going to force myself to mix it up with the locals. And I'm going to find out if there are any signs of intelligent life that actually give a flying fuck about the fact that they are being enslaved and being poisoned in a systematic fashion. And what say you about this? Yeah. Remember, I've been living as a hermit for 15 years. I've spent all my time online trying to find people that I could collaborate with. Yeah. I kept trying to tell them, I do not know how to start a Zoom call. Yeah. No, I do not know how to do it. You're going to have to do it. I don't want to know. I'm sorry, I don't do it. I've wanted, ever since I formed that marketing company in 2006, I've wanted to connect with the tech crazies, because I figured this is the new agora. You know, this is the public square. This is where people meet and greet and chat, and because they're not doing it in real life. A lot of people don't even know who
they're more likely to scream in the online world, because it's easy to scream and not have people, you know, comment over the way you look when you scream, because you're just.
You ever heard of something called Nextdoor?
Yeah, I've heard of Nextdoor.
It's an app, right?
Yeah. It's very useful when you lose a dog.
Yeah. Well, you do know that when the Department of Homeland Security was to be created, it was planned, just as 9/11 was planned. The kind of people that they brought together as consultants, they included people like Martin Seligman, learned helplessness theory. Herman Goldstein, POP, problem-oriented policing, based on the broken window theory. Evgeny Primakov, former spy chief of the former Soviet Union, and Marcus Wolf of the East German Stasi.
Wow.
They brought people like JINSA, the Jewish Institute of National Security Affairs, JINSA.org, who had in place something called LEAP, an acronym that stands for Law Enforcement Exchange Program. It's a program that was inaugurated so that America's chiefs of police and their deputies and the county sheriffs and the highway patrol and the TSA, the airports, the Forest Service people, the Coast Guard, could all go on vacation to Israel for 2 weeks and learn from the world's leading experts on counterterrorism how to police the citizenry, just as the IDF and Mossad polices the people in Israel. And of course, they are the startup nation.
Yeah.
Cyber, that's where it's at.
Well, they've done a good job of destroying a load of land that they can rebuild their mega city on now,
But see, the plan is to take over the whole damn world with this tech. It all emanates from these fat cats that we never hear about, that are largely centered in the city of London. Now, they have partners in crime, confederates around the world in New York and Washington and Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Beijing and Shanghai and Rome and Moscow and Tel Aviv. In this hyper-connected world, it's really easy to organize a lot of people rapidly, isn't it?
It's a big grey globalist intelligence blob that rules the world. That's what I feel. That's the only conclusion I can ever come down to. I know that people want there to be, and in certain parts of especially technological advancement, I mean, you could say Israeli tech really gets in between the lines of the other tech so that they can get in as much information from multiple techs. They like to get companies like Carbine 911, which will do the job of policing. All of the data about people breaking the crimes will go to an Israeli tech firm who will then transmit the information to the police of the certain country they're in.
The father of modern policing is Sir Robert Peel.
Yeah, I know a lot about Sir Robert Peel. He's a very interesting fellow. Twice leader of the Tory party, twice Prime Minister, leader that created the Tory party in actual fact. He's a very interesting guy, the modern Tory party.
Several years ago, there was a meet and greet at the local espresso bar within walking distance of me here in my suburban hovel, as I describe it. Recently, a year prior, the first officer in the city of Richardson's history was killed on the line of duty. So they named a portion of the highway. His name is Sherrod, Sherrod, Sherrod. And so they wanted to honor the first officer killed in the line of duty in the city of Richardson. And because Richardson is a young city compared to Dallas, obviously, or Austin, and it's a suburb, it's a bedroom community, if you will. It might as well be part of Dallas. And as I said, it's got a lot of tech around here with Texas Instruments, etc. But so there was a meet and greet because the police decided that they wanted to make nice with the locals. And so, obviously we want to back the boys in blue because we're good citizens. We want to be good neighbors, and we need to show the police that we support them. And the police are reaching out because they want to show that they're approachable, they're accessible, they're real people just like you. So you meet these people, you shake their hands, some are in uniform, some are not. They offer you a business card. It's got their badge number. Well, one gentleman was he's only about 35 years old. And he has a card too. He proffers his card towards me. I said, thank you very much. Very cordial, casual. We're all standing outside. It's a nice morning. Started at 8 o'clock. And we're all just chatting away and drinking our coffee and, talking to the boys in blue, and all that. And there must have been 50 people there. But this particular gentleman, on his card, no badge number, it said PhD. He is the assistant chief of police of the city of Richardson's police department. So I thought, great, somebody in administration, kind of the boss of the cops, you see? And so we talked for a good half an hour. I mentioned communitarian law at least 3 times in the course of our conversation. He did not bat an eye. And trust me, most other people there, I doubt any other people there even knew what it was, including the police officers. Well, they are members in good standing of these apps like Nextdoor. This is all the result of Marcus Wolf and what he imparted to modern policing post 9/11 with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. Because see, now that's the authority in the states. There's 30 or 40 of them. Okay, these different agencies of law enforcement. They all answer now to the Department of Homeland Security. And so you only have to look at the history of that to see what's happening in the rest of the world concurrently. You see, because as I say, 9/11 was a coup d'etat, not only just on America, but the world. And you could read that. Just read the first 2 or 3, 4 entries at my Facebook page, and you're welcome to link them to your audience if you wish. And
I will do exactly that for sure.
I'm very happy, obviously, to get to know you today, because I think that you're a wonderful guy, and I feel fortunate that we've had this opportunity to meet and chat. But I would like to reach out to people, and because I've been at this for 20 years with what I do. I am focused only on communitarianism and communitarian law. Everything else splinters off from that. Everything else that we're witness to, all the horror stories, it all is permitted by law.
Totally.
And we have to be cognizant of that and realize that it is the elephant in the room. That the Hindu sojourners, the blind man, chance upon. And one feels of its side. He says, but this must be a wall. Another feels of its leg, but no, this is a tree. Another feels of its tail, but no, it's a rope. Another feels of its ear, but no, it's a fan. Another of its tusk, but it's a spear. And another of its trunk, but it's a snake. It's the elephant in the room that nobody sees and no one discusses because they cannot see it. But it is a philosophy, an ideology. It is an asset and resource management system. It is a religion. It is a language, and it is a law. Once you understand that, then you understand the words import and why I haven't fucking shut up since I went public in about 2009. And everybody else wants to talk about the jabs. They want to talk about biodigital convergence. They want to, and yet there's all kinds of good people that are trying to do the legwork and the research that the average bloke, borrowing from your parlance, just will not entertain. They don't have time. They've got to put, they've got a mortgage. They've got a car payment. They've got kids in school. They have no time to do this research. They watch the TV and they watch a half-an-hour news story and, well, I'm educated. I'm in the know. I glance at my newspaper and look at the headlines. Yeah, I know what's going on. Sure, I know what's going on, but
It's
they
the
don't.
same as just pushing the button on the screen.
We're all being played. Doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you sit or fancy yourself. We're all being played. And that's why you must understand what communitarian code speak is and become familiar with the buzzwords. And then you see how all these people are basically making the same noise. They're talking about the same things. And you're bewildered by it all. And then you realize these people are all being incentivized to basically sing within that same choir. But we have to recognize that these people are not singing our song. They're not singing your song. And this is where it must begin. As otherwise, I see no hope for the future. I think in 100 years, our progeny will be spitting on our graves if the cemeteries even still exist. Seriously.
I think that is where we should end it. That's about right. Laurence, it's been a real pleasure, and I thank you for your kind words as well. I knew this conversation was going to be just up my street, and it was just up my street. So thanks for coming on the NEWSPASTE podcast.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Be well.
Pleasure.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed